Okay, so we're at the point where we're going to see the end of Avalon. And this is a massive storyline because Avalon has been around for a good while by this point in our coverage over the X-Men. But also, we're getting into the idea of another character being able to come over to this reality who had left the age of apocalypse reality. And technically, I had forgotten about this character because I remember the Sugar Man, Dark Beast, X-Man. And the thing is, there is a fourth character who had also arrived in this reality. And that character is going to be responsible for the end of Avalon. Like, that's how crazy this story is. Now, just in case we have anybody who's just running our coverage over the X-Men, when it comes to Avalon, it was this space station that was kind of put together by Magneto in the early 1990s. You see, for Magneto, he kind of got tired of the idea of fighting against the humans for the rights of mutants. So he said, you know what? How about this? We'll just leave. And so he built a space station out in space away from the humans as a way to say, you know what? We'll leave you guys alone if you guys leave us alone. Now, of course, there were many different storylines that took place on Avalon. The most important one was Fatal Attractions, where you had Magneto being able to rip off the adamantium off the bones of Wolverine. Now, with all that happening in the past, you also had Charles Xavier shut down his mind, Magneto's mind. And so for Magneto, he's just there. He's completely useless, but you have his acolytes watching over him. Now, his acolytes are really important in this storyline. The acolytes are different people who kind of praise Magneto as some kind of god for the mutant race. Now, his right-hand man kind of took over his position as the leader of the acolytes, and that would be Exodus. Now, by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, we don't know much about Exodus. And matter of fact, we do learn his name in this storyline right here, and that is really it. But with Exodus, he's now in charge of the acolytes. Now, as we kind of get into the opening pages of the storyline, we're also kind of picking up where X-Men Prime #1 had left off at, and let me explain. You see, back in X-Men Prime #1, we had saw the acolytes find this random person who was stuck in some kind of crystal. Now, technically, it's the M'Kraan crystal from the Age of Apocalypse reality. But apparently, when they found the crystal, they found somebody stuck inside of it. Now, for our heroes, they were able to break that person out and put that person in some kind of life support machine as a way to keep that person alive long enough for that person to awake. But here's the thing, because you now have different members of the acolytes kind of getting worried about the idea of bringing this random person on their spaceship. Now, we do learn here that this person is a mutant, a very powerful mutant. Now, at first, I thought maybe they had found X-Men, but then I remembered that X-Men had already crashed on Earth when the acolytes had found this crystal, or this person who's stuck in the crystal. So we're kind of left to wonder, who is this person? Now, you do have Milan and Colossus kind of share their concerns about the idea of bringing this person on a spaceship. But for Exodus, he kind of looks at this as some kind of sign for greatness to come for the acolytes. So he said, Milan, you're going to stay in here and watch over our patient. But also, I kind of hate the idea that you don't believe in me or what we actually stand for. And so you have everyone leave, and this is where things go south. Because right after you have everybody leave, you have Milan connect himself into the computer, the life support computer that's keeping their patient alive. Now, for Milan, he has the ability to communicate with machines. And here comes the big problem, though, because he begins to see all these different images of another reality. And of course, it would be the Age of Apocalypse reality, where he sees Magneto and Exodus on the X-Men team in that reality. And so he's very confused, but he realized that all of these different images are coming from their patient. Now, you then have their patient begin to turn Milan into life energy and begin to absorb him. And just like that, he is officially gone and dead, thanks to their patient. But now we have to check in with the X-Men. Now, for the X-Men, we're kind of using them as a way to kind of figure out what's going on currently with the X-Men. Two big things are currently happening. The first is that when it came to Archangel, he was called up by his ex-girlfriend, Detective Jones, where he had learned that there was some kind of massacre. A bunch of humans were just killed off by a group of mutants. And the thing is, we have no idea who these mutants are. But you have Storm informed Charles that some random group of mutants are now claiming that they were the ones who had massacred all those humans in that building that Archangel found in that issue. But also, we have to remember that some kind of character, Onslaught, had punched Juggernaut across the country over into New Jersey. And so now for the X-Men, they have another patient who's in a coma. Gambit, Sabretooth, and also Juggernaut. And technically, there is a third thing we do get reminded here, and that's the idea of Gambit. Because when it came to Legion Quest, at the very end of that storyline for our heroes, they had believed that the entire world was going to end. And so you had Rogue kiss Gambit as a way to say goodbye to one another. Now, thanks to Bishop, the world did not end, but Rogue and also Gambit, they still kissed. And so it put Gambit in a coma and it allowed Rogue to look into his mind, where of course she saw all of these different dark secrets. And so now we're seeing Rogue in Florida going over to some building and trying to break into that building. But then she's stopped by Iceman. But we kind of see here that by looking in her eyes, she does right now have the powers of Gambit. But we're kind of left to wonder what is so important about that helmet that she was trying to steal. Now, as we transition back over to Avalon, we pick up with Skid and also Fire Fist. Now, these are two characters who had been around for a very long time in Marvel Comics. I mean, like, they were in the early days of X Factor comics. They were trainees for X Factor, but by the 1990s, unfortunately, they were kind of put on the back burner. You know, there was a point where their minds were being controlled by Strife. They had joined the Mutant Liberation Front, but he didn't have Magneto being able to free their minds, and they had joined his side. The problem is now they're kind of regretting joining his side and being acolytes, because by this point, again, Magneto, his mind has been shut down. But on top of that, Exodus is in charge. And the way you have him kind of running things for Skid and Fire Fist, they're not liking the idea of being up on Avalon. They're kind of wondering of the possibility of going down to Earth with the X-Men. Now, you do have Fire Fist get called up because they want somebody to go check in on the patient. Milan had disappeared. They have no idea that technically Milan is dead. And so you have Fire Fist go check in on the patient. And just like that, as soon as you have Rusty walk into the room, he begins to get closer to the patient. And just like Milan earlier, his body begins to turn into life energy. He's being absorbed by the patient. Now, another acolyte sees what's happening, and that would be Scanner. And we come to find out that this person is Holocaust, the son of Apocalypse from the Age of Apocalypse reality. Now, for Holocaust, he's very confused here because once you have Exodus walk into the room, he's kind of like, hey, I know who you are. You're Exodus. Like, you're part of the X-Men. But in this reality, for Exodus, he never joined the X-Men. As a matter of fact, the X-Men are sworn enemies of the Acolytes. So for Exodus, he's kind of like, who in the world is this guy right now claiming that I'm some kind of X-Men, but also so was Magneto, and we fought against you and apparently your father? Now also you have Holocaust looking for Dark Beast, because in that reality, Dark Beast was also working for Apocalypse as well. And so this leads into the two of them fighting against one another, but now they're tearing apart Avalon left and right. And for Colossus, he wakes up and realizes what's happening. Really, all the acolytes wake up and realize what's happening at the moment. But for Colossus, he realized, okay, I gotta find Magneto. His mind is completely shut down. Somebody has to protect him while everything is just popping off on Avalon, while you have Exodus fighting against Holocaust, and their battle is epic. But then out of nowhere, we jump over to Cyclops and Jean Grey. Now, these two characters, they're on their way home. But thing is, as they pull up to their school, they see Amelia Voigt. Now, for Amelia Voigt, she is an old lover of Charles Xavier. But here comes the big catch. You see, she's also part of the Acolytes, but also she has the ability to teleport. Now, technically, she can turn herself and other people into mist as a way to move around. But she also has the ability to kind of use the astral plane as a way to travel long distance. And so right now it's her using that method to travel from Avalon back down to Earth to the school of Charles Xavier. The problem is that while she's doing that, she kind of left open a portal, allowing Cyclops and Jean Grey to teleport from Earth up to Avalon that's currently falling apart as she stays down on Earth. And so as we get into X-Men issue number 43, we see Charles Xavier just trying his best to contact his missing X-Men. He has no idea where they're at. And the thing is, they're on Avalon, but there is a special reason why Charles Xavier is unable to connect his mind to Cyclops and Jean Grey, who are currently on Avalon. Now, for Cyclops and Jean Grey, they're very confused on what in the world is going on here. But for the Acolytes, they truly believe that technically Cyclops and Jean Grey must be working with Holocaust as a way to bring down Avalon, not knowing that technically Cyclops and Jean Grey being here is a complete accident. But either way, you do have our two X-Men fight against other members of the Acolytes, but you also have Jean Grey connect her mind to Holocaust to kind of understand what in the world is going on here. Now, she does learn that Holocaust is his name, but also he has the ability to absorb people as life energy. But she also realized that the only reason why this man right now is on a rampage is because he heard the name Magneto. Now, that makes a lot of sense because at the end of Age of Apocalypse, it was Magneto who had killed off his father, Apocalypse. And so this is Holocaust saying, no, I need to go ahead and kill off Magneto for everything he did to me and my father. Now, you also have Jean Grey find out through Holocaust that he had killed off Rusty Collins, better known as Fire Fist. And for Cyclops, Rusty one of his trainees. And so for Cyclops, he gets so ticked off at the Acolytes because he blamed the Acolytes for kind of forcing Rusty and also Skid to join the Acolytes. And now look what they did. They got him killed to Cyclops' mind. And so for Cyclops, he begins to fight against the Acolytes. Now for Jean Grey, she also tries to go in the mind of Exodus. The problem is that she can't. And it kind of shows that he's on a completely different power level than Charles Xavier and Jean Grey. Now, for Holocaust, he does see Cyclops. He's kind of like, oh, wait, you're Cyclops and you're Jean Grey. But in the old reality, Cyclops was working for Apocalypse, but then at the very last second, he joined the side of good. And when it came to Jean Grey, it was kind of her helping Cyclops stay on the side of good and helping him help other people who were being hurt by Apocalypse. And so for Holocaust, Cyclops is a traitor. But again, not knowing that technically he's in a different reality. But really, by this point, he's beginning to realize that there is a possibility that he's not technically in his reality. Now, for Colossus, he's with Magneto, but he's also nearby an escape pod. But he also saw that Cyclops and Jean Grey are technically there on Avalon. So he's kind of like, I can't leave them behind. What should I do? Because one, I gotta protect Magneto, but two, Cyclops and Jean Grey are nowhere near me at the moment. Now, back on Earth, you have Bishop kind of keeping everybody out of Charles Xavier's room, including Amelia Voigt. But for Amelia, she's kind of like, Bishop, you can't stop me because, like, I can teleport. And so just like that, she teleports into his room to talk to Charles Xavier. Now, for Charles, he does tell Bishop, like, hey, it is okay for her to be here, but also he wants to know why he's unable to pick up Cyclops and Jean Grey. And the reason why, because back on Avalon, when it came to Exodus, he made sure that there's no way that outside people can kind of look into Avalon, meaning that psychics as well cannot use their abilities to connect their minds to somebody who's on Avalon. And so that includes right now Cyclops and Jean Grey. But right now, Avalon is just falling apart. But back on Avalon, you have Cyclops being able to convince the acolytes to work with him, not against him, because he said, hey, listen, I know that you guys feel like that we are your number one enemies because you believe Magneto taught you that. But here's the thing. Did Magneto actually teach you guys that? Or was it other people who worked under Magneto, like Exodus, or possibly, Fabian Cortez? And the thing is him saying like, Avalon is falling apart. We should be working together, not fighting against one another. And so just like that, the acolytes, Cyclops and Jean Grey are going to work together to survive, but also get back down to Earth safely. Now, this could be another hint at the idea of Onslaught on his way. And let me explain, because you have Charles finally supposedly being able to connect his mind to Jean Grey, but apparently he's using a lot of energy. And so you have Jean Grey being able to catch him up. But at the same time, he's also able to connect to Colossus. But here comes the thing. Jean Grey tells Charles Xavier her game plan, the possibility of surviving, but also working her way over to Colossus to use the same escape pod that he has as a way to survive. But you have Charles tell Colossus a completely different story, saying, hey, listen, Jean Grey and Cyclops, they found their own way back down to Earth. So Colossus, go ahead and use that escape pod to get away from Avalon. And so you have Colossus listen to Charles Xavier, grab Magneto, get into the escape pod and just leave. But the problem is that Jean Grey sees Colossus leaving. She's kind of like, why did Colossus just leave us behind? What in the world is going on here? Now, the rest of this chapter is really more of Jean Grey and Cyclops working separately from one another to get back down to Earth. And let me explain. You see, for Jean Grey, she's going to go ahead and leave Scott behind to go find Skid, because Skid is on a different part of Avalon that had already broke apart from the rest of Avalon. And so once you have Jean Grey being able to find Skid, they use their powers together as they re-enter the Earth without trying to be burned up. Now for Cyclops and his group, the Acolytes, they head over to the escape pods to find out the last one, technically the only one, has already been used by Colossus and also Magneto. And so you have Scott say, okay, listen, we got some powers here that could basically help us survive as we re-enter the Earth. And so the last few pages, all you see is our heroes with the Acolytes just crashing into the Earth, leaving us wondering, will they survive the actual crash? Now, as we get into the final chapter of this storyline, we're picking up with Colossus. Now, Colossus had apparently made it back to Earth okay, but where's Magneto? Now, you see Colossus been found by somebody else, and apparently this person knows Colossus very well. Now, she does not tell Colossus who she is, and so when he wakes up, he's kind of like, where's Magneto? Who are you? And he tries to attack her. Now, she's able to use her weapon as a way to knock him out very easily. But after doing that, she's kind of like, hey, you know what? Let's go over there and we'll try this again very soon. But getting back over to school of Charles Xavier is really more of Charles right now just trying to use his abilities to find Jean Grey and Cyclops. And the problem is right now, unfortunately, he cannot find them at all. Now, Amelia Voigt is there as well. And it's really her kind of realizing that Charles has not changed ever since they had broken up years ago, but also kind of seeing him being more like a father figure. Like he's actually worried about his his children. And so you do have Charles continue to try to use his abilities, but other methods as well to hopefully find Jean Grey and Cyclops. Now, luckily for Charles, Bishop does find Jean Grey and also Skid. There you go right there. But the question is right now, where is Cyclops? Did he survive with the rest of the acolytes? Now, we do see that Cyclops is alive and hanging out with the rest of the acolytes, but somewhere in the middle of a desert. Now, here's the thing, because when it came to Holocaust, he did kill off 3 members of the acolytes. You had Fire Fist, Milan. The third one I forgot, but technically is not important at all. But for Cyclops right now, it's him right now trying to use his skills as a survivor to kind of lead the acolytes somewhere safe and sound. And so it's them right now just trying their best to follow Cyclops as their leader, but to hopefully get somewhere safe and sound. Now, for Colossus, we see him being dragged right now by our mysterious character over to a certain location. Now, we have no idea where they're going, but technically we do learn here that this could be an old base of Magneto. And the reason why, because when it came to Magneto's escape pod, it had crashed here for a purpose, meaning that this base must belong to Magneto. But either way, you do have our mysterious character take Colossus over to the supposed building. Now, I kind of like the idea of this story exploring the powers of Amelia Voigt. And here's the reason why. Because for this story, we do learn that once Amelia Voigt's powers were activated, her mutant ability, she kind of lost her physical form, meaning that her actual form is her mist form. And so it takes a lot of concentration to kind of focus her powers to make sure that she stays in her physical form, not in her mist form. And so what Charles wants to do is kind of expand on his mutant ability. And he kind of feels like he can't do that in his physical form. And so what he wants to do is have Amelia Voigt use her ability to turn him and her into mist to kind of help expand his powers a tad bit more to hopefully find Cyclops. Now, technically, this does not work at all, but you do have Cyclops being able to contact Charles Xavier. Because when it came to Cyclops and the Acolytes, they had landed near the Outback base that the X-Men had used back in the Chris Claremont days. Now, the Outback base wasn't, of course, in Australia, but the base has supposedly been deactivated for a good while, or we're supposed to believe that, because you have Cyclops realize that somebody had been there recently and also used computers there as well. So we're kind of left to wonder who that could possibly be. Now, with all that being said, once you have Cyclops being able to contact Charles Xavier, you have Amelia Voigt kind of express that she's very angry with Charles. And the reason why, because Charles kind of pushed himself to his limits when it came to finding Cyclops and Jean Grey, almost killing himself. But it's Charles saying, no, you don't understand, Amelia. Like, I would do anything for my dream, anything for my X-Men, anything for my students. And so it's him saying, like, you don't understand what it's kind of like to care for other people. Now, for Amelia, it's her also expressing that she truly believes that Magneto and Charles Xavier, their dreams are technically pointless. There's no way either one of them is going to be able to achieve their dreams at all. And so this kind of leads into the ending of the storyline, where you have Colossus finally wake up. And when he does, oh my God, when he wakes up, he realized that it's Callisto who had saved him. Now, Callisto was part of the Morlocks, but here's the catch. She looks a whole lot older than the last time we saw her. And so it's her saying, hey, listen, I need your help. Yes, I do look older, but also I need your help to save the world. And this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.